To me, Máirtín epitomises what it means to be a musician. He's been a huge inspiration to me with his dedication to his craft. With Máirtín, the music has always come first. But he carries his talent with such humility, generosity and kindness, and anyone who has ever met him can attest to that. The first time I met Máirtín, I was about 11 or 12, I think. He was invited by my father, Pat Scahill, to come and play a recital at the summer school in Corofin that was being run by the local Cultus branch. I remember we were all very excited that Máirtín was coming to play. We had been listening to, I think it was Chatterbox was the album that was released in 93, I think. So it would have been around that time. The tape would have been in the car on loop back in the day. And I remember when he came into the room, we were finished our workshops for the day and we were all sitting in the room in the school hall. And I remember he just kind of had this meekness about him when he came into the room, and he was kind of saying hello to everyone. And very quickly then, as he sat down to play, this excitement came out of him. It was a real childlike energy, and it was all this sort of mischief in what he was doing while he was playing. And then all of a sudden he pulled all the pins out of his accordion and he was showing us the bellows and the reeds and all the different working parts of it. And it was amazing to see that variety in what he was doing. And then after the recital was finished, he came to our house. He had got wind somewhere along the way that Adrian, my eldest brother, was a great pianist, and he wanted to play some Bach with him, of all things. So he went from playing trad tunes and his new compositions to then sitting in our front room, playing really complicated Bach concertos with Adrian on the piano and him on the box. Of that, he had Chris Kelly, the great guitar player from Galway, with him. Chris has a gorgeous swing style of playing with some great jazz chords in there, and what Chris was doing was mind-blowing, and then that mixed with what Máirtín was doing, and how well it fitted with the newer tunes and the fandangos and the unusual tunes that we wouldn't have heard, and then to see it knit perfectly well with the old traditional favourites. I didn't realise it at the time, and I probably didn't realise it for years, the impact of that day and seeing those two great musicians playing in our school hall had on my musical life. In 2007, I recorded my first album with Ryan Malloy called The Dusty Bridge. On this album, we recorded a version of Máirtín's tune, The Celebration Reel, a tune I've always loved. And we had the whole thing recorded, finished and ready to go, and I thought, Shapers, I better give Máirtín a buzz just to double check that it's okay. Not even double check, just to check that it was okay that I was recording his tune. So I rang him up and said, how are you, Máirtín? I'm wondering, is it okay if myself and Ryan Malloy record The Celebration Reel? And he said, oh, I'd be only delighted to Máirtín if you recorded that, sure, it'd be great. But tell me, he said, how did you get on with the third part where it goes up high? Is that awkward or tricky on the fiddle, or can you manage it okay? And I said, the third part? Do you not mean the second tune? And he said, no, sure, it is all the one tune. You have the A part and the B part, and that repeats, and then you have the C part and the D part, and then there's the E part, and then it goes back to the first two. And I was like, okay, well, I have to come clean. We've already recorded it, and we're getting ready to go to print, but we only recorded the A part and the B part. What do you think? Will we pull the track, or are you happy enough to let it go? And of course, Máirtín, being as generous as he is, he said, not at all, let it go, delighted to have it being played. And he was also good enough then to write the liner note on the album, where he actually referenced the day he came to visit in Corrafin and play tunes in the front room. Really, really special to have that on my first album. So I was chatting to Ryan Malloy the other day, and we decided that now is the perfect time to have another go at the Celebration Reel and to play it as Máirtín wrote it. I'm joined by Ryan Malloy on piano for this one at a distance. So here it is in all its glory, the Celebration Reel. set that Ryan and I recorded on the Dusty Bridge album were two hornpipes that I learned from Máirtín's playing, Callan's Retreat and The Long Lane. Máirtín recorded those with the Chatterbox Band on a live album, and I remember the first time I heard it, I was just completely stopped in my tracks at the ending. It's a really intricate and fast run that Máirtín does so well at the end of the tune, and sure, nothing would do me only to take it and slow it down and learn it, and I hope we did it some justice on the album. One thing that has stuck with me about Máirtín all through my life is his generosity, especially his generosity with his time. I remember what it felt like when I was that 11, 12-year-old kid and this giant of Irish music was coming to our house. He made sure to take enough time to play a few tunes that we knew, to have a little chat with us, to make us feel like we were included in what was going on. And that's something that I have taken with me, and I try and do it now when I'm out gigging and touring and I meet young musicians that are just starting out in their journey. I'll try and take that little bit extra time to make sure that they feel seen and heard, and I have Máirtín to thank for that. I feel very privileged to know Máirtín O'Connor, to have been able to spend time with him over the years, playing tunes, hearing his perfectly timed story, a story and a joke for every situation, and also, of course, learning some of the amazing tunes that he has brought into this world. And I'm very thankful for this time where I've been able to properly delve into it and look back and fully appreciate the influence that Máirtín has had on my life. I'm going to leave you with this tune that I recorded with Máirtín at his kitchen table in Annadown back in 2017 when I was doing my Tune a Day project. Here's the Lark in the Morning.
Hello everyone, my name is Sharon Howley and this is my video for the 2020 Visionaries series by Track Ireland. I was delighted to be chosen and to be part of this initiative, and I'm here today in the Kilfenora Céilí Band parlour, which is part of the Burn Centre in Kilfenora, my home village, talking about the biggest influence and inspiration on my playing, which is the Kilfenora Céilí Band. I'm going to start off by playing two of the first tunes that I ever played on the cello when I started playing trad on the cello. It's the Jimmy Ward's jig and the chorus jig. So I put these two tunes in a set together myself when I was about 10, because neither of the tunes go up past E string, because when I first started playing cello I couldn't go any further than high D. So this is my favourite two tunes from when I was about 10 on the cello. Growing up in Kilfenora, I was always surrounded by the music of the Kilfenora Céilí Band from even before I even knew who they were or what they were. We had a B&B at home, and I remember from as far back as I can remember, the Kilfenora Céilí Band CD was on every single morning in our dining room for the guests as they were eating their breakfast. And then as I got a bit older, my job in the B&B was to actually serve the guests, so I was going in and out of that, the dining room every morning before school. And because of that, I actually had all the tunes and sets in my head. So when I actually went to try and play them on my instrument, I realised I actually knew the tunes already, and that was just purely by the constant listening to them and just it even being on in the background constantly at home. It would have always been the Kilfenora Céilí Band or No Hill and Tunnanan or Tommy Giggles. Those were probably the three CDs that were constantly on at home. So for that I'm very grateful to my parents that we were constantly surrounded by music from a very, very young age. And then when I was about 5, I started learning the whistle from Gary Shannon up in Kilfenora Hall, and I started classical fiddle then soon after that. And I remember watching the Kilfenora, especially when I started playing the fiddle. I remember watching the Kilfenora Céilí Band. You know, we would go to if they were playing on the hall, and I remember we did a video of them. I don't know what it was taken from, but I remember there was an awful lot of dancing and they were playing up on the stage, and I remember just being so taken by the fiddle players in the band again, because I was, learning the fiddle. I wasn't a great whistle player now, so I stuck to the fiddle after that. And the fiddle is such an animated instrument when you watch somebody playing it, and I remember just being so mesmerised by the fiddle players and how they were going with the tune, and the fact they were using their whole bows, and the triplets on the up bows and then the long down bows and droning on the strings. I just thought that was there was no other way to play the fiddle, only by how the fiddle players in Kilfenora played. And I remember taking my fiddle and trying to play along with the CD when I was a kid. God help my parents listening to that, it must have sounded atrocious. Sawing away, trying to copy them and trying to get the long down bows and the droning and the chords, and I just thought that it was the only way that you could play the fiddle. And I remember I hadn't gone to solo fiddle classes. I would have been playing in group. There was a group class of Gary Shannon's on Wednesday nights, and that would have been with a mixture of instruments. And then he had a band, then he started doing bands, the Burn band. And I remember I was playing fiddle in the band, and I thought, well, this is it, this is my chance to play just like the Kilfenora. So my best, it was the bow, and I just remember I was always so taken by. And as I got older then, I became more aware of, I suppose, and interested in the history of the band and the legacy of the band. and how the band was so much more than the musicians that I go up and see in the hall as a kid. And just learning about the history of the band and, all their achievements, from 1909 when it was first established, just to play music to raise funds for a church, to everything that is achieved, up to now. And I remember learning about, the lineage of the band and how so many members are related, and how I'm actually related to some of the older members of the band. And I remember just the sense of pride that I had with that, to have a connection to the band, the musicians that you looked up to so much, and you actually had a connection to them. For me, that was just really, really special. And just maybe even more want to be like them and play like them, and it would have always been a dream to play with them. And I remember when my sister Emer started playing with them, we were just so proud of her and so delighted that she got to play with the Kilfenora. And I remember then, a few years later, when I was asked to guest with the band on the cello, I remember it was one piece in Glór. Just I came on and played the piece and came back out again, and it was such a special time. I thought it would never happen that I could actually play with the Kilfenora, the musicians that I literally looked up to, since I started playing music. And after that, then I started playing a little bit more with them. And I remember in my leaving cert year, I wasn't allowed to play with them, and I was raging because I had started playing with them when I was younger in school. And Emer was going off playing in the concerts, and I was always dead jealous of her. I had to go home and study. But then it was great when I went into college. I was able to go back playing with them again. And one of the first sets that I ever played with the band were, and recorded with the band actually, were 3 old style polkas. So this is Ballykeal Manor and Jerry's favourite. For me it's so interesting to trace those tunes back, and the kind of, to understand what I'm very interested in personally myself is the kind of why of the music. Why was the music played in a certain way? Why were these tunes played? Where did the tunes come from? And I suppose with Kilfenora music, it was all to do with the dancing. That's the main style of the music, was to play for dancing. I remember reading Jim Ward had said, you didn't go to a place and expect to be listened to. You came to play for dancers, and that's why Kilfenora music is all lift and rhythm. It's to give the lift and for the dancers. And I think when you do listen to Kilfenora music and listen through it through that lens, you can really hear that in the music. And also the fact that when you listen to the music, it is based on and related to an awful lot of the fiddle style, like how a fiddle would approach to tune. I think features really strongly in Kilfenora music. Even the fact that it's, when we're going into a tune, we do a triple, an ascending triple, a D, F, G. You wouldn't hear it going down. That's all to do with the fiddle, on the up bow to get a strong down bow for the D, or the whatever note, depending on the tune. All those little things for me is really interesting to look at. And then also like the versions of the tunes that we play with the band, why we play a certain phrase over another, and that would be to do to keep the phrasing of the tune intact so that it would suit the dancing, and as well as that, you know, the tune types that we play, you know, obviously reels are the most important tunes, the most common tunes around here, but also we'd have a big repertoire of more unusual tunes, like those old style polkas, military two-steps, quadrilles, and the quadrilles and polkas would have been played to suit the dance sets that were popular around here back in the day, and they would have been danced to those more unusual tune types, not just reels and jigs. And I think, you know, it's really important to preserve and play those tunes so they're not forgotten. An awful lot of those tunes you wouldn't hear outside of Kilfenora or outside maybe North Clare, and I think those tunes are really important to play and to celebrate. And I think it's great that the Kilfenora do play those tunes because they're, you know, bringing them to a wider audience, and that's what I love to do. And earlier on this year, I was fortunate enough to win a Radham Kjol, which was just amazing, and the Kilfenora came up and performed with me, which was fantastic. And as part of that, I got to choose what the Kilfenora would play, and the reason I chose those 3 old style polkas was for that specific reason, so that, you know, you're taking really old local tunes and, you know, arranging them in such a way that they've got maybe a more, you know, a fresher look, but you're still staying very true to the tradition of the tune, and bringing it so that more people can hear the tunes and learn the tunes. And for me, that's really, really special. And as well, you know, apart from those tune types, we would have an awful lot of more unusual tunes, and they would be, if you go way back further again in Kilfenora, there would have been a traditional fife and drum bands, and later on that progressed to a brass and reed band. And the tune types that they played in the band, it's very interesting that an awful lot of musicians that were in the fife and drum and later the brass and reed band actually played Irish music as well. So they were taking the tunes that they learned with the brass and reed band and started playing them, you know, on their traditional instruments. And that's why we've got, you know, more unusual tune types that you wouldn't actually hear anywhere else apart from Kilfenora. Like there's, you know, Jim Mulqueeney's Party Piece, that's what it's called, which would have been, you know, the late Jim Mulqueeney, what he used to play. That's, you know, definitely a tune from the brass and reed band. Another one of my favourites is the Belfagor March. You could actually listen to brass and reed bands playing that tune, and that was taught to the local musicians by a travelling bandmaster. It's actually written by a French composer, and even just to trace that back and to see again the why of how we play tune or where it came from, I think is really interesting. And it's just great that the Kilfenora do play those tunes and kind of honour the history of the local area, the music of the local area. So I'll play the Belfagor March. Being a very unusual instrument in Irish music, playing with a very traditional band, you know, very traditional in a very traditional genre. But I think in Kilfenora, having more unusual instruments playing with the band isn't as unusual as it would be in other areas because of the history of music in Kilfenora with the fife and drum band and the brass and reed band. And you know, the Kilfenora was always, you know, trying to move and adapt to the times all throughout the century. You know, there's you know, you can see evidence of that as they, you know, progressed and adapted as music was progressing and adapting. You know, even Ita McQueenie was playing the double bass when they won the third of their 3 in a row in the 1950s, which wouldn't have been very usual at the time. And it's very special that she played the double bass and now I'm playing the cello and I'm actually related to her. So even that connection of having the more unusual instruments for me is very special. And also another really interesting fact about the music in Kilfenora, you know, is the use of harmony. I mean, on the cello it would be mostly harmony that I would be playing. And again, in Céilí band music that would be unusual, but actually in Kilfenora, because of the brass and reed band, an awful lot of musicians could actually read music, and they were playing in harmony. And you know, if you listen to older recordings of the band, there was always elements of harmony, which, you know, now playing the cello and, you know, using harmony, although it is in a new way, there is still a connection with the older band, and for me that's really special. Now playing the cello with the Kilfenora now is actually just so exciting, because being a cello player in a Céilí band, there isn't any other cello players in Céilí bands, so really there's no rules, I suppose, as such for what a cello player should do or shouldn't do in a Céilí band. And I remember in the beginning I was always so shy to play. I would have stayed mostly with harmonies, long notes, you know, and normally the harmonies would have been written by other people in the band. I would always have been so afraid not to ruin the music, you know. And I think playing with the band, I mean, there are such incredible musicians in the band that I was just constantly learning and still continuing to learn as I play with them, and you know, constantly experimenting with what the cello can do in Irish music. And I suppose when I first started playing, it was very much, you know, I would only play maybe for a tune or two, I might come in for a part or two, again mostly long notes. But I suppose as I developed as a musician through playing with the Kilfenora, I mean, I have to say, without playing with the Kilfenora, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today, because I was given that opportunity to experiment with different ways of playing the cello within Irish music. And I think the fact that the Kilfenora are such a traditional band, it stopped, well, me anyway, from, you know, it made me focus on the tradition and, you know, how to develop and how to enhance a tune in a very traditional manner. First of all, you know, you're almost, you know, there's a certain sound that the Kilfenora Céilí band has, so you're trying to elevate that sound and you're trying to enhance that sound as opposed to trying to change it, for me anyway. So when I'd be approaching a tune, I would be approaching it, you know, through the lens of the style of Kilfenora music. And it's just really interesting to, you know, on one very important sense, you want to stay true to, and for me especially being from Kilfenora, you know, stay true to the roots of Kilfenora tunes and the history of Kilfenora. But again, because music is adapting and changing so much, in order to stay current, you know, and this is the case for all bands, you know, you need to move and adapt to stay current within the music scene these days, and it's finding that balance between staying to the tradition and also moving forward. And I think playing the cello in that is just, for me it's so interesting, because I get to experiment with so many different techniques, and it's testament to the band for allowing me to do that. And also to John, our leader, for allowing, you know, everyone to have a voice and, you know, to try different things. So I remember in the beginning, you know, I'd be very much playing my long notes, and then I'd be, you know, now I'd be playing either, you know, 4-note chords or chopping or playing bits of the melody or counterpoint. And it's just, finding that sound, that voice for the cello in Irish music, and in particular in a Céilí band, for me it's just so exciting and so interesting. It's very hard in 20 minutes to sum up the impact that the Kilfenora Céilí band has had on me as a musician, both growing up and aspiring to be like them, and now as I'm playing with them and continuing to develop as a musician as I play with them, and developing a role for the cello in Irish music as well, and just to be part of the history and the legacy of the Kilfenora Céilí band. It's the music that my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents and would have danced to and listened to, and just to be part of that for me is really special, and to have that connection. With that, I'd just like to say thanks very much to Trial Ireland. I'm delighted to be part of this series, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the other 19 videos. I'd like to say thanks to the Burn Centre for allowing me to use this beautiful space that is the Kilfenora parlour. It's just an amazing room. It's got the whole history of the band, the different families that were part of it, a full family tree, just different pictures, and it's just constantly being added to as the band, as the history of the Céilí band develops, and it's just such a lovely space to celebrate the Kilfenora Céilí band and what is the Kilfenora Céilí band in the village. I've probably repeated myself I don't know how many times, but playing the cello in the Kilfenora is something new, and hopefully there'll be lots of cellos in the Kilfenora Céilí band for years to come, and just to be part of that legacy to me is really special.
Hello, my name is Mark Redmond, and this is my 2020 Visionary presentation. And today I'd like to focus on the composer and musician Neil Martin from Belfast. Neil is a fantastic musician, and he's well at home in classical music and traditional music. He plays cello, he plays uilleann pipes, he plays whistle. And what really appeals to me about Neil's music is how he arranges for uilleann pipes and orchestra. And I first encountered Neil's music in 2011 when I was tasked with performing a piece from his suite for uilleann pipes composed in 2004 called No Tongue Can Tell. And this had been premiered by Liam O'Flynn in Belfast, and he played it later on in the National Concert Hall of Dublin. And in advance of performing this piece myself, I was lucky that I got a recording from Peter Brown, who was working at RTE at the time. And I listened to that recording for days, weeks, months, and it really blew me away. It's fantastic music. What really appeals to me is Neil's ability to compose a new tune based on the older tunes, and it can be played solo in a pub setting like this. We're coming today from a pub called French's in Gorey in Wexford, which is a hotspot for traditional music over the years. And coincidentally, myself and Neil have met here for drinks in the past to discuss some of his music in advance of other performances. But back to the piece anyway, it's a jig, a 4-part jig called Sheltering Sound, which is the final movement of the piece I mentioned. And Neil very much had Liam O'Flynn in mind when he composed this piece, so I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. I'm going to continue now with the second movement, which was in that piece, which is a lovely tune called And They Loved. And this is based on the love that Neil's grandparents had for each other. And one of the factors which he used in composing this was the use of modulation. So he actually composed this piece for a whistle in the key of B, and then later the pipes entered. So I thought I'd play it today and meet in the middle ground and not be switching between whistles and pipes. So I said I'd play it all on a set of pipes in the key of B. And just before I started the last tune, I mentioned that we were here in French's Bar in Gorey in Wexford, and I'd very much like to thank the owner Jim French for allowing us to use it here today. As I say, it's a great setting for traditional music, and I hope to see you all here in the near future again when all this is, when everything gets back to normal. So this is a slow movement called And They Loved. was And They Loved on the B pipes, and I'm going to run back and change over onto the D pipes again. And I'm going to play a reel this time, which is the only reel I'll play today. And this comes from the first movement of the piece I mentioned earlier on called No Tongue Can Tell. And this is a fantastic reel that Neil has since given a separate name to it, which is Hugh Canning's reel. And Hugh Canning was Neil's grandfather, but he was also the father of the well-known piper and writer on all topics to do with traditional music, Tomás O'Cannaigh. And this is a lovely tune in that first movement, which is otherwise a slow melody, but this reel is lovely. It's in the key of B minor, and it's one of my favorite tunes actually. And as I say again, when I heard this for the first time, it blew me away. So hope you enjoy. This is Hugh Canning's reel. Thank you very much. I'm going to finish off now with a set of jigs that Neil composed in 2016. The first one is called Malloy's. The second one is called Falloon's Reel, and then the third one is called Queen of the Skulls, which is what gives it the overall title of this piece when it's performed in an orchestra. And Neil performed this in 2016 with the Ulster Orchestra, and I was delighted to play it in 2017 with the Wexford Youth Orchestra at the National Concert Hall in Dublin. And at the event they won a Special Achievement Award, which was very enjoyable. So these are lovely tunes. As I say, they work as great solo pieces and fit in fantastically with orchestras as well. So I'd also, before I finish up, like to thank Trad Ireland, Trad Éireann, and Culture Ireland as well, and for Jim French to allow me to use this fantastic pub as well. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.
Hi everyone, my name is Elaine Reilly and I'm a tenor banjo player from Granard in County Longford. I'm so delighted to have been chosen as one of the 20 participants for Trad Ireland's 2020 Visionaries project. It's so nice to be able to perform in some capacity for an audience, so I really hope you enjoy my performance today. The visionary I chose for the project is Angelina Carbury. Angelina is a phenomenal banjo player who was born in Manchester but has lived much of her life in County Longford. And although I was not directly taught by Angelina, her music has been without doubt the biggest influence on my music over the years in terms of technique, style, rhythm, ornamentation. So before I go into that much further, I'm going to play a jig for you now. It's a jig called Happy to Meet, Sorry to Part, and this is a particularly unusual version that came from a recording in the late 1970s from a flute and fiddle player from County Sligo called John Joe Gardner. So I'll give this a go first. Yeah, so just a little taster there of my style of playing and the kind of music you can expect for the rest of the performance. So I first heard Angelina playing when I was about 10 years old. I got a copy of her CD for Christmas, and just from the get-go I absolutely loved everything about her music. It just sounded so effortless even though there was so much going on, and it was just so easy to listen to. And what I really loved about Angelina's playing was it just wasn't about speed. It wasn't about how many triplets she could fit in a part, which I think sometimes banjo players can get carried away with. It was more about swing and flow and just really matching the person she was playing with, and also just really high level of solo playing. So I think I decided fairly young that this was the kind of playing that I would love to be able to do and the kind of style that would suit me. So I suppose that was a really pivotal time in my musical development, even though I was really young. Just of all the styles of banjo playing I've heard before that and since, Angelina's style has just always been consistently the most, the style that made the most sense to me. So I suppose I spent a lot of my younger years attempting to model certain aspects of Angelina's playing. Particularly what I was so amazed by was that she could do so much with her right hand while keeping the flow of the tune, while just keeping it so steady. So I really wanted to be able to do that, and I soon found out that when I started trying to do that, it was actually a really, really difficult thing to do. And I think that's why there aren't actually that many players as technically capable as Angelina, because what she's doing, particularly with the right hand, is so difficult. So I knew if I was to achieve anything close to that level, I'd have to work extremely hard. So I spent a lot of my younger years, and even now still, listening to Angelina's style, her duet albums or solo albums, any sort of recordings I could get my hands on. YouTube videos, I'd say I've watched every single one of them at least 10 times. So that's what I did growing up. I just really immersed myself in her music and hoped some of it would rub off. And I was really lucky in that sense that there was actually so much music and recordings of Angelina available. So for such a young musician, she had so much recorded. So that really helped me when I was trying to develop my style. It was a really good guide as to this is the way you should approach banjo playing, and it was just a really enjoyable way to try and learn when I really loved the sound of it so much. So it didn't really feel like work. I really enjoyed the challenge over the years. So on that note, I'm going to play a couple of reels now. They are probably two of my all-time favourite tunes that I've learned from Angelina's music. And it's from a duet album with Máirtín Quinn. And when I was picking tunes for this performance, I just knew I had to play them because they're kind of tunes myself and my friends always play, and we never really get sick of them or sick of listening to them. So I'll give these a go, both composed by Finbar Dwyer. Yeah, so two of my all-time favourite tunes there, two Finbar Dwyer tunes that I learned from Angelina's playing over the years. So moving on now, Another really significant way in which I've been influenced by Angelina's playing, just by listening to her music and playing her music over the years, I've been exposed to loads of different composers and different musicians, just kind of indirectly through her music. Just maybe by reading sleeve notes of her CD, I kind of knew who composed certain tunes, and that would make me go and seek out these composers and all their other work. So in that way, I've learned so much more than just banjo playing techniques from Angelina's playing. I've learned so much more about composers such as Finbar Dwyer is one, Liz Carroll also I've learned loads from just through hearing her tunes from Angelina. Also another big one is Ed Reilly, who I first heard through Angelina's playing, and I continued to just listen to his music and seek out all his compositions. So I'm going to continue now with the lovely hornpipe, which I learned just only recently, but is a composition of Ed Reilly. And the second hornpipe I'm going to play is in fact the most recent tune I've learned from Angelina's music. We were both guests at a wedding about 2 summers ago, and we were all sitting around playing tunes the second day of the wedding, and Angelina starts playing this really lovely hornpipe and just caught my attention straight away. Just a really simple but beautifully musical hornpipe. And it wasn't until I met Angelina a few months later, actually at the Porter Keith Festival, and I got to ask her about this tune, and she didn't really remember what tune I was talking about for a while, and kind of lilted a bit of the tune for her, and she remembered it then, but she let me know what the name was then. And just really important for me to mention now that not only has Angelina's music been so influential to me, Angelina herself has been always so encouraging, even since I was young. The odd time she might have heard me on the radio and sent me a lovely message saying, "Oh, well done, lovely playing." And even those small things have been so helpful just for just developing confidence in your own playing. So that's always been really helpful. And just Angelina, anytime I've met her, we've always had great chat and great crack. She's just a lovely company to be in. So again, Angelina, thank you so much for all your kind encouragement over the years. Yeah, so I'll try these 2 hornpipes now. First one, Ed Reilly composition, and the second one is Napoleon Crossing the Alps. That's what the name was. So I hope you like them. Yeah, so two of my favourite hornpipes there, one of which I learned really recently from Angelina's playing, the other a lovely Reilly composition. So I'm coming to the end of my performance now, but there's just one gig I want to draw attention to, and it's just anytime I think about Angelina, I always remember this gig. It was a gig herself and Peter Carbury, her father, played, and it was at one of the flats in Sligo, I think 2014, so it's a good few years ago, but I still remember it as clear as anything in my mind. And I just remember thinking, yeah, this is the kind of music I want to play, this is the style I want to be good at. And I just remember for months and months afterwards playing the tunes, just trying to learn the tunes they played. And it was actually that particular gig they played in B, and that kind of also was influential to me because it got me into kind of playing in different kinds of pitches, tuning the banjo up to E flat, which I am now, tuning it down to C, just a different way of looking at how you could improve your playing. So that was another really influential part of how Angelina has influenced my playing, and Peter as well. That was kind of the first time I'd heard Peter live in particular, and I just thought he was such a character and just a wonderful accordion player. So I'm going to finish up with a couple of reels that I would associate mostly with Peter Carbury, but I think Angelina's also on the albums where I learned them from. They're two really nice albums, Peter Carbury's, that focus on Longford music, which also drew my attention, of course, growing up. And particularly what I love about Peter Carbury's playing is his playing of single reels. I hadn't really learned many single reels until I started listening to Peter, and so I'm going to play two single reels now, two of my favourite tunes. First of which I knew I just couldn't leave out of this performance. It's called the Sligo Reel, and it's a lovely composition of Sligo flute player James Murray. And the second is a lovely tune which they recorded as well on a separate album, I think. And it's called Jack Coughlin's Fancy. So Jack Coughlin was a lovely flute player from East Galway. So I'm going to finish up with these, and just before I go, I want to say a massive thanks to anyone who's watching, who's stuck with me for the 20 minutes. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope I've in some way shown the massive influence that Angelina Carbury has had on my playing. So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of the performances. Thank you so much.
that's the very first tune I remember learning from my teacher, my mentor, my hero, and my great friend, the great Joe Burke from Kilnadima in East County, Galway. The name of Joe Burke has been synonymous with Irish accordion playing and Irish traditional music for over 60 years. And he's played and performed and taught the world over. And he's one of my greatest inspirations and one of my greatest heroes, and such a great friend to me and source of encouragement to me over the past almost 20 years now. My first memory of Joe comes from, believe it or not, when I was about 3 years of age. And there was a concert in Gurchin at one of the very early Coleman festivals. It was in a marquee. And I think, although I can't be sure, I think the marquee was on the site of the present day Coleman Heritage Centre. And I suppose being so young, my memories are kind of hazy, but I remember seeing Joe sitting on the stage and just being struck by the accordion and the stage presence, and especially the beard. And I remember saying to my granddad, "Is that Santi?" And he says, "I think it might be." And that was my introduction to Joe Burke and his music. My grandparents, Pauline and David Sheridan, were great lovers of traditional music, and my grandfather David was actually a very, very good accordion player. And he was a young man in the 50s and 60s when Joe, I suppose, was making his real impact upon the traditional music scene, right from when he made his very first recordings for Gail Lynn in 1959. So always throughout the years, there was a great sense of appreciation for Joe and his music in the household, and I was very lucky to be more or less born into that. You know, I spent an awful lot of time with my grandparents when I was young. So I had fond memories of listening to Joe on tapes and CDs and even an odd LP or two. And the next time I seen Joe playing in person then was, I'd say not too long after that, maybe a couple of years, at one of the very early Morrison festivals in Riverstown, the James Morrison Festival. Now at that time, the Morrison Festival was epic, and they brought some of the greatest musicians from Ireland and abroad. And I remember Potter's Pub, which was a lovely pub, it's gone now in Riverstown. And I remember going in with my grandmother. I think my grandfather had died at that stage. And going in and looked up in the left corner, and Joe Burke was sitting there playing with Brendan McGlinchey. And it was some of the most wonderful music. And I suppose I was just old enough that time to really appreciate the music and really listen to it. And I was hooked. I wanted to do that. I wanted to play the accordion and I wanted to be a musician. So a couple of years after that then, I started playing and I progressed. And an annual trip for us here was always up to the great Joe Mooney Summer School in Drumshanbo. Drumshanbo, of course, is only about a half hour from my home place. So up we went every year, and I went into Joe's class one year. And I was such a huge fan. And like meeting Joe Burke that time was like meeting Elvis. Like I was awestruck. You know, he's such an imposing figure with the big beard and so tall and just such a great musician. And I had the greatest musical week of my life up to that point. And what I loved about Joe and his music that week was that we didn't just learn tunes. We learned about the music, about the people who played the tunes, and about the places the tunes came from. And that's what really, really interested me. So I remember saying to my mother, I'd love to go down to Joe for lessons. And she was saying, "Oh, God, was an awful journey, like, would he take you?" And I said, "Sure, we'll ring him, we'll see." So I don't know where I got a number for Joe anyway. And I rang him and he says, "I'd love to come down sometime for lessons." And he says he'd have to check the diary. He didn't know if he had space at the minute, but he'd check and he'd get back to me. So a week went, and 2 weeks went, and 3 weeks went, and nearly a month went. I remember saying to my mother, "God, he mustn't have had space now, that's a pity, but I'll chance him again after Christmas." So surely to God then, about 4 weeks or 5 weeks after, the phone rang, and I was in the sitting room doing my homework, and my mother came in and she says, "Joe Burke is on the phone for you." And I says, "He is not, get away." But surely to God, I went out and, "Hello, Daithí, this is Joe Burke," was on the phone, and I was just thrilled. And he said, "Someone is after discontinuing their lessons and you'll be able to start next Saturday at 12 o'clock. And I was absolutely thrilled and so delighted. And I remember the excitement for the whole week in waiting to go down to Joe's for lessons. And he was teaching in his home place that time. And I remember going down, and as I was walking in, I could hear Joe playing the Pigeon on the Gate. And I played the Pigeon on the Gate at that time, but not the way Joe played it. So as soon as I went in Joe was saying, what will we do? And I said, I want to learn the Pigeon on the Gate like that. And that's why I played that tune there. Joe's music just, it struck me, and it hit me in the chest. His appreciation for the music, his love for the music, his personality, his mastery of the accordion, it all came out in every note he played. There was nothing showy, there was no gimmick. It was pure, hearty, soulful, classy, traditional music played at its best. And that's what I loved. And to this day, that's what I still try to play. He had a huge influence on me, not just musically, but personally. And I play a couple of tunes now that I would have learned during those lessons from Joe. And the first one is a great jig that comes from the County Leitrim called Malloy's Jig. It came from Tony Malloy, a flute player, I think. And the second one then, I don't think I learned it from Joe, but it's a tune I'd forever associate with Joe. And it was the first track on that legendary album he made with Andy McGann and Felix Dolan back in 1965, a tribute to Michael Coleman, and it's called The Luck Penny. Beautiful, beautiful old tunes, and two I play very, very often. Going down to lessons with Joe was such an experience. And as I said earlier from the lessons in the Joe Mooney, it was the same when you went down and into Joe, into the little house. And you would learn not only tunes, but so much about the tunes. And I've always had kind of a historical mind, and I've always been inquisitive. And I don't know how he didn't go mad. I'd ask him so many questions about people and about music and about tunes and about accordions. And he'd always so patiently answer them all, you know. And it used to be great when he'd be trying to think of a tune to teach you. He had a big kind of an oak desk beside him and a little black book. And he'd go through the book and he'd be looking, and do you know the Reilly Mullen of Ass? I do. And do you know the Luck Penny? And do you know this and do you know that? And then we get a tune. And you know, more often than not, he'd think of one himself without finding one of the book at all. He'd say, oh, what about this one? And he'd take off and he'd play, and it was great. But one thing that has always attracted me about Joe's music is that he has such a love and appreciation for the fiddle. And of course, as many people will know, the fiddle is hugely close to my heart. And that's something that attracted me so much to Joe's music. He was the first accordion player really to not play the accordion like an accordion. He brought in so much of the fiddle technique, like rolls and triplets and long notes and short notes. And his left hand is something that always amazed me. And not necessarily the bass hand, but how he used the bellows. And I always felt that Joe always used the bellows like the bow on a fiddle. And he'd always say, like, that's where your rhythm comes from. The rhythm is there. It's not here. It's always there, you know. And that's something I took to heart. And that's something that I really try to use in my own playing. And it's something that I really try and pass on to children when I'm playing. But, you know, he'd tell me about when he was living in America and meeting people like Paddy Killoran and Lad O'Byrne and Andy McGann and Larry Redican. And I remember him telling me about the first time he met Lad O'Byrne, the great Sligo fiddle player. Andy McGann brought him to his apartment, and Joe took out the accordion and he was playing, and he said, I had to leave it down. It was the most wonderful fiddle music I ever heard. And I turned to Andy and I says, my God, do you hear that? And so these what it done as well for me that time was, these are names that I had heard and I'd listened to, but it brought the personalities of these people alive, and it brought their music alive. And that's something that I just love so much. And I'm fierce thankful to Joe for doing that for me, you know. So then I remember telling him that I was related to James Morrison, the great fiddle player, and he was so excited about that. And he thought it was just amazing that there was still someone playing music from Sligo who was related to James. And I remember he gave me a copy of the great Harry Bradshaw reissue, The Professor, that had come out years before, but you couldn't get it at the time. And I was so delighted. And he gave me so many CDs. He used to burn CDs for me, Lad O'Byrne and Coleman and Tommy Cawley and Patsy Cawley and all these great Sligo fiddle players that I just loved their music so much. And it was such a sense of encouragement to me, and that's something that has led me down to researching so much about fiddle music, and even publishing the Fiddlers of Sligo book a few years ago with Oisin McDiarmid. And that all stemmed from the encouragement that Joe gave me, you know. So I play a hornpipe this time that Joe would have given me, that I think he learned from Sean Maguire. And it's a lovely tune called Minnie Foster. Stickly one, but it's a nice one. And I suppose following on from the lessons then, and when I discontinued going, Joe became such a great friend, and he often rings me up and we have great chats about music and who's playing where and who I'm playing with now and what I'm doing with, and he always took such a great interest in what I'm playing. And you know, he's such crack. I remember he rang me one time very late, about 11:30 or 11:45 at night, and I was just going to bed, and it says alright, I'll ring him tomorrow, you know. So anyway, I forgot the next day. Anyway, about 5 or 6 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was Joe Burke. And I picked it up and says, hello Joe, how are you doing? So anyway, we were talking for a while, and the crack was going good, and Joe says, no, I rang you last night. And I said, I know, I said, I was just going to bed. And you know, I said, I'll ring you back tomorrow. And I said, I forgot about it since. So anyway, we were talking for a while and the crack was going good. And Joe says, no, I better let you go. I'm sure you want to go to bed. And this was about 6 o'clock in the evening, you know. So that's the kind of wit he had. And it was so funny, you know. And such crack. And I remember one time when I used to do the flags when I was very young. And I remember playing in an accordion competition at some All-Ireland flag anyway. I says to Joe, how do you think I do? And Joe says, Ira, I think you'll win it, but there again, I don't bet on horses. And you know, it was just so funny. But I suppose I could talk for hours and hours about the impact and the influence that Joe has on me. But it's very hard to fit it all into 20 minutes. But I'm so thankful to everything that Joe has done for me and the encouragement that he's shown me over the years. And I suppose that's something that I always try and bring into my own music and my own teaching, as I spend a lot of time teaching now. So I'll finish off with a reel. And one of the nicest tunes I ever heard Joe playing. A lovely reel that came from Paddy Fahy. And I remember someone gave me a tape one time of Joe and Frankie Gavin playing at a concert. And this reel was on it. And I hadn't ever heard it. I never says to Joe, and Joe says, I haven't played that tune in 25 years. And it was a lovely tune. So that's the tune I'll finish with. And to say thank you to Trad Éireann and Culture Ireland for this amazing opportunity. And I hope that I've been able to show in a few short words the impact that the legend, my teacher, my mentor and my friend Joe Burke had on me. So I leave you now with Paddy Fahy's reel, and as Joe would say himself, thank you very much. Thanks very much.